The Mysuru Literary Forum Charitable Trust and the literary community of Mysuru Book Clubs welcomes you to the 4th Mysuru Literature Festival and the first virtual festival. Here's an adventure. What awaits beyond these closed, mysterious gates? Whom shall I meet? Where shall I go? Beyond the lovely land I know? Above the sky, across the sea? What shall I learn and feel and be? Open strange doors, to good or ill, I hold my breath a moment still before the magic of your look. What shall you do to me, O book? And now, at the virtual sessions of the Mysuru Literature Festival, what shall we learn and feel and be? What shall you do to us, O author? What doors will you open? What magic will you bring? We welcome the writers from across the world who made this happen. Authors who are able to join us in the digital space and share their books and writing with us. And for the next hour, let us enter behind closed mysterious gates, travel above the sky and across the sea to meet them in this virtual space. Before we start, a few guidelines for our attendees. Enter your questions in the Q&A section. Our moderator will send them to our speakers. Please post questions relevant to the panel discussion. Please enter the name of the city you are from. We are interested to know where our audience is from. Sit back and enjoy the session.
Hello, Kavitha. Hello,
Hi,
Nandita.
Shubha.
Hi. Little did we know, me and Nandita, when we met in Calicut, that we'll be meeting like this. I was hoping, she would be here physically for the Mysuru Literature Festival. Anyway, hello and welcome to the 4th edition of Mysuru Literature Festival.
Yes.
I am Shubha Sanjayers, the chairperson of Mysuru Literary Forum Charitable Trust and Mysuru Book Clubs, established in 2015. Those of you who are tuning in to our program for the first time, the virtual Lit Fest is the Mysuru Literature Festival's digital platform, bringing to you the live session of the panelists, the authors, talks on books, and so on. We are very excited the way it is being received and it's evolving. We hope to bring in more authors in the future. Today we have 2 women who have brought huge difference in their own field. One such person is Nandita Das. A warm welcome to you, Nandita. Nandita is a well-known name in the film industry and has acted in more than 40 films and has won accolades for it. Her directorial debut, Firaaq, participated in 50 international film festivals and has won 20 awards. Her second film as a director was Manto. This is based on the life of 20th century Indo-Pakistani short story writer Saadat Hassan Manto. Ms. Das was the first Indian inducted into the International Hall of Fame of the International Women's Forum in Washington, D.C. A warm welcome to you, Nandita.
Thank you.
She will be moderated by Kavitha Lankesh, who is an achiever by herself. She is an international award winning filmmaker. She began as a documentary filmmaker before directing her first feature film, Deviri, in 1999, which went on to win international, national, and state awards. She is considered to be one of the renowned filmmakers of Kannada cinema. A warm welcome to you, Kavitha.
Thank
Before
you.
I sign off, those of you logging in from the YouTube, please leave your questions there. The moderator will pass it on to them. Kavitha, your questions will be on your chat box. A warm welcome to all our audience who are ever supporting. So the
Thank you so
screen
much.
is all yours.
Thank you. First of all, Nandita, it's lovely to see you. And
Yes,
long
always to see you too.
from 1999 till now. To know you has been wonderful, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and moderate with you today. And my first question would be,
Thank you, Kavitha.
my first question, Nandita, would be, you are a filmmaker, activist, mother, so many roles. Which do you find yourself the most closest to, and which is the most challenging, you think?
I mean, it's tough to answer. And you're a filmmaker. You're a single mom like myself. You're a filmmaker. You're been a dedicated daughter. So the challenges. And I think many women, juggle like this. In fact, I did a webinar in the morning about why women juggle.
Okay.
But we also want to do these different things. And in some ways, I feel that it's a privilege that I don't have to choose. It doesn't have to be an either or. When I'm writing, I like writing. When I'm directing, then it's directing. Of course, sometimes it's too much of a clutter. Like, in these days, especially during the lockdown, there are so many conversations and talks we are doing online. And then my child doesn't go to school these days, so it's all online. So he's 24 hours there. Manto has been now almost more than 2 years. This is also, it's been a long time. I want to start writing. So there are many different things. There's no I wouldn't want to choose. I don't think everything has its own place, and
No, not
at
choosing,
different
but I was
times you
just,
want to do different things. No, but even liking. I mean, I think, how do
yeah,
you compare? For sure, if I had to just choose between acting and directing, I would say direction is far more fulfilling. Because right from the idea, the inception of an idea to its fruition, and how it comes out, and how people connect or don't connect, and all of that whole journey is enormous. It's very challenging, but it's also very exciting. Whereas as an actor, you enter a world which is sort of predetermined, is going to be
yeah,
decided. It's, a film is far more a director's medium.
yeah.
So actors are often perceived to be larger than they really are. But at the same time, I don't want to choose, because you can't direct every story, or you can't tell every story as a director. So there are other stories that you want to be part of, or that you think, oh, these are important stories to be told, and I feel really fortunate to be part of it. And also, my 40 films in 10 different languages has given me an experience which has been really wide, in terms of going to different parts of the country where I would have probably never gone, on a holiday or whatever, like whether it was from Mrinal Sen's film to a small village in 24 Pargana, or for Adur Gopalakrishnan's film to a small, village in Ottapalam, a place in Palghat, or for Rituparno Ghosh, another place. And so they've been different. And you maybe most people don't know, but Deveri, the film that they mentioned, Kavitha's first film,
Yeah.
I was Deveri.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, that Kavitha and I go back to her first film, and my first and only Kannada film, actually.
Yeah.
So,
By the way,
I don't
since
think,
you have acted in so many languages, which do you find it very challenging, the language?
I think Kannada and Telugu.
Okay.
I still find Malayalam and Tamil comparatively easier, maybe because I've done 4 films in both the languages, and there is some connection also between the two languages. So I start seeing the connections.
Yeah.
But I recently did a Telugu film also, Virata Parvam. It was more like a guest appearance. But I do find Kannada Gottila and Telugu Radu for now. Korchu Malayalam Mariam and konjum Tamil theriyume.
Hey, you
So the South Indian
Malayalam sounds
languages
good,
are
Yamala.
definitely difficult. Because I lived in Delhi all my life. My father is from Odisha, mother is from Gujarat. So anyway, I grew up speaking four languages. And then everyone thought I was a Bengali, and I had lots of Bengali friends. So they taught me, Bengali, apart from the fact that I did four Bengali films as well. But the experience that the acting time has given me has also been extremely precious. So ideally, I think, I love them all.
Okay. See, from the first film you made, Firaaq, which was excellent and was really, as Tuba introduced, it went to 50 festivals. There was a long gap after that. And also, with this question, I would like to ask, it was a kind of controversial film even at that point. At this point, if you had made, would it have been more controversial? And why was there a long gap?
I don't know, controversial. Today, if we sneeze, it might become controversial. So I don't know. Everything seems to be like everyone's become very touchy, and it's very sad because no great art or literature can thrive if there are so many barriers, if everyone is going to be so touchy about these things, in the sense that you, of course, don't want to be irresponsible, any sensible, when once you call something literature. In fact, Manto himself was tried 6 times for obscenity, the same works that we celebrate today.
Yeah.
So, what is obscene in the eye of one is great literature in the eye of the other, and who's to decide? And finally, time is really the only judge to say that yes, this work was great. So but it is true that many of the things, even my own work or many of the other films that were made a long time ago, if they were to be made today, I don't know whether they would be made. I doubt if Firaaq could be made today. I think too many people would be would have problems with it, or even Fire for that matter. Although Fire, I mean, since then the whole conversation around LGBTQ issues has really grown, and I want to believe that Fire had an important role to play in bringing about that discourse, to the extent that 377 actually has been abolished, an archaic law that criminalizes homosexuality. At least the film brought that conversation into public space. So and even in Firaaq, there was no name calling, there was no blame game. It was more about being able to see ourselves. It was, a film can only be a reflection, a mirror into our own prejudices, our own dilemmas, our own lives, experiences, fears, all of that. So even in Firaaq and after that Manto, I have never really made films that are preachy or are trying to teach you a lesson or trying to settle scores with anybody. It's more human, and it's more about human stories, because I think that's what people connect with.
Correct. Absolutely. Finance for films, again, I find it very difficult. Producers.
Oh God, tell me about it.
So how do you face the challenge? Because though it's been 20 years, I made 10 films so far. I've had it extremely challenging. Though finally we don't compromise. I think we don't just do films for the heck of it. We do films for what, if we believe in the film. How do you sort it out? How have you managed to
I think
do
it's
something
very
as
tough.
big as Manto? Yeah, tough.
Yeah, no, it is tough. And I think it's tough world over. It's not just in India. I think independent cinema has always been difficult because there is a lot of economics involved, a lot of money is involved, a lot of people are involved. So definitely economics interferes with art. And there aren't, especially in our country, there aren't too many takers who would say, okay, let's, do this film, even though it may not be very massy or very mainstream or doesn't have a big actor. Here, before you tell the story, they're asking you, okay, who's the star? And when they say star, they want like sort of a male star. Then a male star with a male big star, you can still get a female big star. But if it's a woman-oriented film, then you can't get a big male star. So you have to take a B grade. It's all about sort of a calculation, it's about a science and not about the art. So definitely it is challenging, and not just for us. I mean, you are some of the masters of independent cinema. You talk to Shyam Benegal, or you talk to Adur Gopalakrishnan. I mean, they all will tell you it's challenging even for them. So I mean, in that sense, we are, not sort of not
They're on
that established. I mean, they have a body of work, and yet they find it difficult. You're still prolific. In 20 years, if you've made 10 films, your average is two a year, which is the Woody
Yeah.
Allen average, which is not so bad. Mine is terrible because I have made two films
No, but
with 10 years apart,
you're also
but
acting, so
hopefully this time
you're
it won't take
juggling.
as long.
Yeah, but you're juggling many hats. You're also
Well, I
acting.
didn't I didn't do too much of acting.
Yeah,
Yeah, but not I didn't do too much of it. But it is tough. In fact, for instance, The Court,
yeah,
which Chaitanya Tamhane made,
yeah,
and his second film is in Venice now, The Disciple. And
yeah,
I was seeing one of his interviews, and he said, I couldn't have made this film. All my thanks is to my producer. Where are
yeah,
those Vivek Gombar kind of producers to make so sort of, they're really art house cinema. They're really, like we
yeah,
say, literature. They're really
yeah,
films that are not mainstream massy. And to be able to trust in a director, finally a film is made with the partnership of good producer and a good director. And in our country, often people think producer means an investor, which is not the
yeah,
case. Producer
that's
is
true.
almost like the father of the baby. So
Yeah,
it is I think it is challenging for everyone. But I think once you believe in something, you get so driven by that. You want to, if you really have to want to tell that story. And for me, both Firaaq and Manto were not born as, oh, let me look for a story and then I
yeah,
found them. They were
yeah,
both born from a sort of a compulsion, a desire, deep desire to want to tell the story. And I believe then the world will conspire and somehow you will get the money to make it. And both were in shoestring budget for what I wanted to do. And then I used up a lot of my goodwill and a lot of friends and a lot of other people that I reached out to who worked for free or worked for very little money. So you also have to, find other ways, not just money, but in kind, find support. And actually, it's very heartwarming because there is a lot of support in terms of
yeah.
cast and crew,
In fact, we had discussed
those who
Ismat
will
Chugta at
do
some
these kind of
point, I
films.
think, didn't we? We had discussed Ismat Chugta some time back, long time back. I don't know if you remember.
Your voice is breaking, Kavita. Sorry,
Ismat
couldn't hear
Chugtai,
you.
I
Say that
remember
again.
we had discussed Ismat Chugtai some time back, long time back, that we wanted to do it. And in fact, Manto's story, Mortal Dawn, me and my sister have given it away to so many people, as because we love him and love his writing. Every time someone would come, we would give that as a gift to some people. And I'm very glad you made the film, and it's a wonderful film. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kavita.
yeah. This is another one which could you talk a little more about Firaaq, how it was political, and a commentary on the riots of 2002 Gujarat riots. How did you
Yeah,
research for it? How did you think of making a movie on that? And it was a very balanced movie, as
right.
you said. It was not blame gaming, nothing. It was none of that. It was a very humane story, I think. It was wonderful. How did you decide to make that film first?
So, Firaaq, actually, the first film I wanted to do was about a relationship, a very simple, small film. I thought, let me just start small. And I don't even know where that script sort of went off. I've rediscovered it 2 years ago again. But Firaaq was kind of, it just sort of came into me, like how Manto used to say when people would write that, ask him, why do you write? And
Yeah,
he said, I don't write stories, stories write me. And I really felt with Firaaq that when
yeah,
2002 carnage happened in Gujarat, of course, like you and I'm sure many people were deeply disturbed because it was the first time we were watching also visuals of that level of violence. I mean, we had heard stories, we had seen some footage of the partition, but this 24/7 television, the way it happened at that time, that was the first time NDTV had a 24/7 channel. And we were
yeah,
actually watching as things were happening. And I think it just sort of deeply impacted me that in today's day and age, at that time, even in 2002, that how can people be killing each other and raping and looting and burning houses, stories that we have heard almost of partition. recognition. And of course, there have been other riots before that. So it's not to say even the Sikh riots in 1984, but I was much younger. I was not in film. So I didn't find a way to respond through cinema. But when Firaaq happened, in fact, I did a series of talks after that called Identity and the Notion of the Other. And then I realized that every time I would give these talks and have conversations and Q and A's, the audience became so polarized and passions would fly, and there was so much anger on both sides. And so I felt maybe these talks are not enough. I need to do a film. And then I started with one story, Sanjay Suri and Tiska Chopra's story about a woman who was film. And I, after the carnage, I didn't go to Gujarat for 6 months because I felt like I have nothing to offer to the people who have, lost their. Uh, can you see me? I think Kavitha, you're frozen. Are you able to see me, guys? Just somebody give me a thumbs up. Am I audible? Ah, okay. No, for a second you had frozen, so I wasn't sure. Okay. So almost for 6 months, I did not go to Gujarat because I felt like I had nothing to offer in terms of any kind of respite, and I didn't want to do some social tourism. But 6 months later, I went with Kuldeep Nair. He was a very senior journalist, Rajya Sabha member. He was an ambassador as well, and more importantly, a true peace activist and a very strong voice. And he said, "No, you have to come with us." And I went there, and that was a very, very moving and a very disturbing experience. Just talking to people, going to the refugee camps, talking to activists, the lawyers, the women, the children, seeing kind of vacant eyes. And it was haunting when I came back. And I felt like I want to do a film, but I want to do a film that doesn't further polarize the conversation. And yeah, and that's why we didn't even have too many cuts. There was no overt censorship of it, but there was very little marketing. It wasn't distributed well. And this was a time pre-digital era. So now, of course, it's on Amazon, and it was on now it's on Mubi and various other platforms. But at that time, it was really tough to even release such a film. But what it did, it triggered conversations around the issue, and I think that's what cinema can finally do. We can't create revolutions, but we can hopefully trigger conversations that we feel
Right.
need to be had.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. You did. How do you find it challenging? Since I mean, I haven't gone to a film school as such. As far as I know, I don't think you did
Nor have
too, but I
I.
think you did. But you did do a script writing course, didn't you? For a
No,
while.
I didn't. No, I didn't. I from Manto, I had admitted in a script lab, which means I had a couple of
Okay.
mentors with whom I did a few sessions, but I have never really done a film course. And yeah, I never even assisted anybody. So, not even a huge avid watcher of films. So in some sense, making films was more, I don't know, like your life experiences and other things that you learn. Of course, as an actor, you're privy to the shooting process, but as you know, that the shooting process, while is very important, is actually a very small, the smallest part of the whole
Yeah.
filmmaking process. So
Yeah.
much goes in
Till
before and
today, I
after.
hate. Till today, I hate the post filmmaking. The whole marketing,
Really?
the
Oh,
interviews, and
marketing
everything.
is the worst
Yeah.
part. Oh,
Yeah.
that is definitely, I think any director would dread it because,
Yeah.
you just somehow make it and then to be able to talk about it. And these days, most of the questions are so superficial and you have to keep smiling and doing all kinds of strange things. No, that is a terrible part. But what I mean is post production, as in
Yeah.
editing and
Yeah.
sound and music. For
That's
me,
beautiful.
that is the most exciting part
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
shooting for me is the biggest nightmare because there are so
Yeah.
many factors and everything that you think can go wrong does go wrong. So you have to be literally on your toes, and with so many people, more than 100 people. Also, Indian film sets tend to be larger than I think they need to be. So
Yeah.
shooting mostly is a nightmare, but the post production where you're with nobody, you're just with your editor or your sound person or
Yeah.
music, and every little thing you can work out,
Yeah.
and all the mistakes that have been made by everybody and
Yeah.
yourself, slowly you can throw them
Yeah.
out, and slowly a film starts emerging. That
Shapes.
to
Yeah.
me is the most exciting part.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think your son was there throughout the shoot in Manto, wasn't he?
Yeah, and
We,
that was really challenging. That was
yeah,
really challenging. In fact, I
yeah.
also separated just before the Manto shoot, like during my pre-production. Probably
Oh,
wasn't the best time, but that's how
happens.
I guess it was meant to be.
Yeah,
And his first day of his spring break was my
yeah.
first day of my shoot. So I
Okay.
took him with me to Gujarat, and it was a very
Okay.
large scene with 250 people
Yeah,
as villagers doubling up as junior artists. There was
yeah.
Gurdas Man, who had come for one day to shoot, and it was 45 degrees heat, and the dust was
Oh,
all over. We were all wearing cloth around our faces,
yeah,
and my son was kind of clinging because he was also shy. It was a new
yeah,
set, and it was really a nightmare.
yeah.
And even through the whole shoot, we shot in Gujarat, the Lahore portion. So the 13 days that we stayed
Yeah,
there, the entire cast and crew stayed in
yeah.
a hotel about an hour away. Whereas I took a little somebody's
Okay.
house. I literally walked in and said, "Do you mind if I stay here?" Because, and they said, "Oh, the owners don't really live here." So I said, "Okay, give me their number." I called them up, and my son and I, we stayed in that place because I wanted to be so close to the set, because we had
Yeah,
night shoots, and it is,
yeah,
as you know, it is quite challenging. So at least the child can walk into the set, or I can
yeah.
go and make sure that he's asleep. And so yeah,
How
so
old was? Did
shooting,
he like it?
and he was yeah, 2017. He was 7 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was all kind of new for him in some ways
Yeah,
because he hadn't seen me do any film
yeah,
really.
yeah,
But so it was all fascinating. But as an urban child, just the
yeah,
fact he was in a village and playing with
yeah.
all these, village girls who were talking to him in Gujarati, he was answering in Hindi. It was, I think, a fantastic experience in many ways. And
I'm
also
sure.
for me, I mean, sometimes
Yeah,
we just think of the challenge, but it's also
yeah,
the joy because, the shoot goes off in a way that you didn't really want it to. Like every
yeah,
day I used to think the sun is setting too soon and it's rising
yeah,
too soon. Like on
yeah,
the night shoot, suddenly the sun would be coming up. I'm like, oh my God, we still have 3 shots. Kala kapda lagao, like put black cloth to make it dark. Or if it was a day shoot and suddenly the sun is sort of setting, and you would say, okay, get all your reflectors and, put the lights. And so every day it used to be mad, racing against time.
yeah,
And then that whole
yeah.
fatigue
It's a
goes when your
challenge
child
every day.
comes and a nice hug. So it is tough, yeah, but it's also joyful.
Wonderful. But he did debut recently in your short film. He
Well,
debuted as
he's
an actor
actually
in a
also in
short film recently,
Manto.
which was wonderful. Oh,
Yeah,
was
but
he?
he's
Okay,
also in
okay.
Manto. Yeah, you have to see the beginning again. He's hanging
Yeah.
from the bar and he's been credited as
Oh,
boy on the bar. So he just has like this one little shot
that's
where
good.
Nawaz had to just kind of, lift him and hang him on the bar. And even in
Okay.
that, he was smiling and he was looking at me. And had it been probably another child, I would have rejected that shot. So I did a bit of nepotism, bad
Yeah,
word these days, but did a bit of that, and
yeah,
yeah, kept the shot. No, so he's done his little debut. But yes, in Listen to Her, the
yeah.
7-minute
It's a
short
wonderful
film.
film. In
Thank you,
lockdown,
Kavitha.
I mean, I think you've shown what a woman is possible. What we were talking about, like multitasking. The first question,
Yeah.
what I asked you, I think you've shown that so simple and so beautifully. Can you talk about that film itself, about domestic violence?
Thank
And
you.
it was a very subtle and simple film, and done very well, I
Yeah,
think, in this,
thank you.
with all the constraints. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, everything was a constraint. I just
yeah,
shot it on my phone, and
yeah,
not I didn't even have a tripod or a stand. I didn't know how to put the phone. I would put it on books, and then
yeah,
I would tell my cook, "Acha, on karo, abhi off karo." And then I realized that the camera was too far. The sound
yeah,
it wouldn't catch the sound.
yeah,
So I had another old phone, so I put it next to me
yeah,
and did the sound, and I would say shot one, take two, and I would give the clap, and I would tell
yeah,
my son to do something, and then I had to perform. The most challenging was to
yeah,
perform because you're
yeah,
still being able to do this whole
yeah,
conducting business and
yeah,
direction,
yeah,
then to kind of get into that person's character. Of course, I'd written it, but it was a
yeah,
very impulsive response to domestic violence, and also overburdening of work that women faced, anyway face, but
yeah,
during the pandemic, during the
yeah,
lockdown, it has really increased because now the
yeah,
child is at home, the partner, husband, father,
yeah,
in-law, whoever that you live with, and a lot of the burden comes on the woman. And therefore,
yeah,
and this is not just in India, world over, So I read an article about how women are finding it difficult to do Zoom calls. And
Yeah.
I felt, wow, that's my story, because I was doing a lot of these
Yeah.
conversations in the beginning, because all these
Yeah.
migrant worker
Yeah.
issues were like everything, the inequality of our society suddenly started showing up even more, during the pandemic. It just, in some ways, it was good, because then we have to stop being hypocritical, and we could actually see
Yeah.
the inequality that we have normalized over
Yeah.
the years and decades and whatever centuries almost. But we couldn't do anything. And through cinema, cinema is not an impulsive medium. It's not like
Yeah.
writing a poem or doing a
Yeah.
painting. You have to
Yeah.
do so much preparation. You have to raise money. You have to get all these people, and you can never be impulsive and spontaneous. And I'm generally a very impulsive person. So I just literally wrote a 7-page script one morning, cleaned it up a little bit, and next day I just shot it. So next 2 mornings or 3 mornings I shot it, because in your own house you don't realize how much the sun travels and the light
Yeah.
changes.
That's
When I
true.
actually started shooting, I was like, oh my god, it's completely changed. So
Yeah.
see how the light has changed in the background,
Yeah. Yeah.
how light changes behind you. I can see all those lovely plants are gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one doesn't realize it as much. And
Yeah.
so I just shot it with and there are all these voices, and I hadn't really recorded the voices. So for me that was also challenging, because I had to
Yeah.
imagine a husband
Correct.
in the bedroom, a
Yeah.
cop on the other side of the phone, or a woman
Yeah.
speaking or
Yeah.
fighting, and
Yes.
cooker whistle and a bell ringing. So I had to imagine a lot of things while performing.
Yeah.
But I thought, why not? So I did that, and then many people in the post production helped me. Shikhar Prasad, my editor for Firaaq and Manto, he edited, and others sort of joined in terms of music and sound. So yeah, it was really a spontaneous desire to respond to everything that was happening, and especially to this slogan of "Stay home, stay safe." We
Yeah.
thought it's such a privilege, just the
Yeah.
fact we have a roof, because we were seeing all these migrant workers and daily wagers trying to go back home. And the city had literally shunned them away, and they were neither, they could live in the city nor could they go. And it was just such a troubling period, and it still continues, of course, I mean, their lives. And I felt, wow, stay home, stay safe is such a luxury. And then we started realizing that the domestic violence cases were increasing. And then
Yeah.
you realize that even stay home, stay safe is an irony for many,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it isn't safe. If you are locked in with your abuser, how is it safe at
Yeah.
all? So yeah, so that's how Listen to Her was born. It's on YouTube. I request the viewers, if you haven't seen it, please do watch it and share it, because we've also given helpline numbers after that. And it
Yeah.
just helps bringing something that's locked in the four walls. It helps in bringing it out in the open, in the public space.
You had on record saying that you had immersed yourself in Manto, the man and the writer, before making the film. Can you tell us briefly the process and how long it took you to actually write the script? I'm sure it's for many
Yeah, that took
years it
very
must have
long.
taken. I still remember you had come to Bangalore, I think, to write some time. Then you were in Bombay writing.
Right.
It's a
Yes,
long
that's
process.
true.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I mean,
It
how long
is,
it
yeah.
take? And, I mean, I think
It
I would
was
have loved to
long.
be in your shoes or be some assistant to you in the whole process.
Why did you tell me then? It's all very good to tell in retrospect.
Hello, even now,
Kavitha,
any
I'm going
project,
to
tell
ask you
me.
for the next.
I'll hold your umbrella if you're doing that.
Yeah. Most
I know
high
you would do the
profile
same for me if I have a
spot
project.
girl.
Come on. Yeah, I mean, please.
Absolutely, I would.
I have no anger
Definitely.
for those things. You know that.
No, definitely. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
always a pleasure
Yeah.
to work with friends and people you like and admire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was really tough, because it's one thing to be drawn to somebody's way of thinking and their writing and their philosophy of life and the struggles they went through, and to, to feel that it's so resonant. Yet it's a whole different thing to actually start working on a film. And
Yes.
when I started reading the translations, most of the translations of Manto are really bad, like they are of most, regional.
Yeah.
Now, of course, a lot more translations are happening, and there are some really good translators, who they, by themselves, are great authors. But Manto hadn't been translated that well. So the more known you are, the better translators you get. So I started reading the
Yeah.
translations, So Manto was still known more people who cared about literature or theater goers, and the more sort of the intellectual crowd or some young people because of his rebellious nature. But broadly, he wasn't that well translated. So I had to read the originals. And while he was very prolific and he had written a lot, there
In Urdu,
was
is it? Did you
then
understand Urdu?
in
Did he
Urdu.
write in
No,
Urdu?
I don't. I
And you
I
could.
understand a fair amount because he speaks. I
Okay.
mean, he writes in a fairly simple language, which is kind of a
Okay.
mix of Hindi and actually Urdu anyway is a mix of Persian,
Yeah.
Arabic, and
Yeah.
Hindi. So
Yeah.
Hindi and Urdu are not as different as we think they are. They are really like sort of the two ends of a
Yeah.
spectrum almost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having the fact that I had grown up in Delhi, I
Yeah.
understood a lot of Urdu and I spoke a lot of it, but there were also very difficult words which I didn't know, and there were not enough good Urdu
Yeah.
dictionaries that were
Yeah.
from Urdu to English or Urdu to Hindi. So it was really quite a struggle. I took the help of many people. There was Mir Ali Hussain,
So
who
how
was
long was the
sort of a
process?
consultant initially, a co-writer. The process was 5 years almost. I started in
Okay.
2012 on Manto's centenary, May 11th. And I mean, that's when the idea of doing the film started sort of brewing in my head. And I really started by the end of 2012. And it went on till
Yeah.
almost till I shot. I would say I kept sort of tweaking the script. Then I
Yeah.
also went to Lahore a few times to meet the family, because I think without those
Okay.
human touches, without those small nuggets
Yeah.
that they shared, and especially in creating the
Yeah.
character of the wife, because Manto didn't write too much about
Yeah.
her. So while
Oh, she
his
was
character
wonderfully
was
etched,
still
I think.
easier to build, yeah, well, I could
Yeah.
take a little more liberties with her character
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
the daughters and even her sister who's alive today, they shared a lot of stories. The daughters were very young, so their memory was sketchy about the father, but much more about the mother. And everyone said she was a very soft spoken, very affectionate, caring, simple woman. And I said, okay, that's great. But tell me more. Like, wasn't she troubled living with a man like this? It mustn't have been easy. We
Yeah.
are putting him on a
Yeah.
pedestal, but he was a difficult man. And I didn't really get too much about how she dealt with that anxiety, or was she angry ever? Was she frustrated? Did she cry? I didn't get too much of that. They said no, she was a pillar of strength. She kept the family and the girls together because he died very young. So she
Yeah.
was the one who really raised the daughters. And I had to really scratch the surface to get some little hint of her frustration. And I built upon that. And I
Yeah.
did make her feistier than she was. But I'm very happy that to share that, when they saw the film, in fact, I brought the daughters to watch the film. And there was a Bangalore premiere, I remember. So they, I really wanted the family to come and see it. And they were very moved by the portrayal of
Yeah.
their mother. So I felt like, okay, now, because I didn't want to in any way be disrespectful to their idea of their parents and how they saw it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be true
Yeah.
to Manto, and Manto wouldn't have liked it if I'd only shown him in a sort of a good light, because he was flawed like all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And he himself believed that it's more important to show reality as is than trying to embellish it and beautify it. And he was very against that. So I didn't want to beautify Manto at all. So, I showed him with his contradictions, to the extent that sometimes you have more empathy for the wife than you even have for him. And,
Yeah.
and that is how sometimes it is. And one should have more sometimes empathy if the character
What
deserves
about
it.
the selection of the stories? Because it's a series of short stories which have interwoven, and I mean, some of those stories have stayed with me even after I've read 10 years back or something, because it's so
Right.
haunting. And I'm sure that is what, also inspired you to take up those particular stories, maybe. But was that the
Yes.
reason, or, any other reason you?
From the beginning, right from day one, when I started writing or even thinking about the structure of the film, I always knew that I wanted to sort of intersperse with his stories, because I felt that you can't separate the writer and the man. They are so deeply intertwined. In fact, even in his work, the line between fact and fiction are very blurred. Sometimes you don't
Yes.
know. He says it's a story, but it's so vivid, you almost think
Yeah.
that it's actually real and he's just changed the names. Or sometimes he writes an essay which is so sort of descriptive descriptive and interesting that you feel, did this really happen? Is he just making it up and calling it an essay? Because he also wrote a lot of essays which are very powerful.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I felt that to know the man, you had to know his work, and to know the work, you had to know the man. So they were so inseparable that I used also the story to move, to create that momentum, to tell us more about who he was. And also, I don't like, for instance, seeing violence. I don't like to see violence in films, especially when they are sort of glamorized and they are normalized. And at the same time, it just coincidentally happened that both Firaaq and Manto are films that deal with violence, that talk about violence, that are about the effects of the futility and the effects of violence. So how do you escape it? But in both the films, I haven't really shown any violence.
Yeah.
So through these stories of partition, whether it was Kholdo, whether it was Thanda Ghosh, whether it was Toba Tek Singh, through those stories, I could show the horrendous ill effects of the impact, the tragedies that any act of violence brings upon humanity, brings upon relationships, people, what it does to people. And so the stories also allowed me to do that. So and that's something I think a lot of people kind of connected with.
Yeah.
Like initially I was a little worried because some people felt that it's too ambiguous. When do you enter a story? When do you come back to his life?
Yeah.
Feel people figure it out. We sometimes underestimate people,
Yeah.
but almost all audiences kind of really connected with that structure, and I'm glad they did.
Was it ever shown in Pakistan finally? I don't know. I remember you were
So
talking
yeah,
about
that was an
it.
interesting story.
Yeah.
Well, it was, yeah, it's in the sense that it was, the censor board didn't allow it to be, sort of shown there. And their reason was that it was anti-partition, which was a very strange reason. And also that the sexual content wasn't permissible, although it didn't. I mean, in fact,
Yeah.
somebody came and told me that when I saw the film, I knew it was by a woman director. And I said, why do you say that? And this person in Cannes, in fact, so didn't really know my work or anything. And so she said that, so I asked her, why did you say that? And she said, because in a film like this, you have so many excuses to show violence and sex, and yet you chose not to.
Okay.
So I think being an actor and having been on the other side and knowing that how people view sexuality or nudity, and how we haven't really become discerning, and not just in terms of portrayal, but how we take it, how we receive it. I in fact stayed away from it. So when the Pakistan verdict came out, of course they didn't allow it. But the best thing was that writers, journalists, filmmakers, poets, students, unprovoked by me or the producer or anything, they came onto the streets in 5 cities in Pakistan and protested. Faiz Ahmed Faiz's daughter, Salima Hashmi, when I saw that placard on the street, with other very senior journalists just standing there and kind of protesting against on the ban on the film. So that was amazing. Of course, it's on Netflix. So in that sense, people have watched it. And every time I've been to Pakistan, I have found films that DVDs, earlier we had to have a lot more DVDs, of
Yeah.
even films that I wouldn't find here. So the
Yeah.
pirated DVDs, I think, first go to Pakistan. So anyway, I'm sure many have already seen it there.
What do you think of the current censorship? Do you think it's important now that you
Oh
talked
my
about
God.
so and it's not been censored and it's not been allowed for Pakistanis to see it, but at the same time now it's on Netflix. So what's the whole purpose, you think? Is there a purpose
Yeah,
towards
it's a
any
bit of a
censorship?
farce.
And do you think, because I remember when we made Deviri, Nandita, I'm sure if I made the
Mm-hmm.
film now, I'll get an A certificate, adult certificate, which
Yeah,
wasn't the scene then. It still had a U certificate at that time. Have we gone morally more, what do
right.
you say?
No, I also found it like when I went for the Manto, I really, no, you're right. Because even when I went to the censor board, like once the censor board had watched the film, when they did the conversation with me,
Yeah,
it was crazy. I mean, I felt like I was Manto on a trial. It was a 2-hour conversation with the censor board. These 6 people, in fact, one of them went to the loo. I was sitting outside, I remember. They had finished the screening. One of them went to the loo and he was all very teary, very moved. He just came out and he said, "Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you." So I said, "Oh, thank you." I thought, "Oh, okay, one person has liked it." And when I went inside, they were all very moved and they said all these nice things. And I thought, okay, now it should be easy thing. They'll all give me this approval. And then they had these 22 questions.
Okay.
I think you should cut this. I think you should change this. I think you should. So there were 22 questions they had. And I literally fought with about each one and argued my case. And I told them, I said, I feel today like what Manto would have felt in the court, in the witness box, fighting his own case,
Yeah.
about each word and this and some of the words. And I said, listen, this is part of his writing. It's from his original works. You're telling me, what he had to do 70 years ago. Haven't we progressed that in after 70 years, I still have to argue about the same words that he fought about?
Yes.
So it was quite crazy. But finally, we only had maybe 3 or 4 audio cuts. And they
Okay.
told me that you can replace the word. And I said, no, I'm not replacing it. I'm going to
Yeah.
just beep it. So let people know that these words have been censored. I'm not going to make it softer and change it to something. And they were just like words that are sort of mildly abusive, which is how people would talk in that milieu.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're
Yeah. Yeah.
using bad words for the sake of it. So,
Yeah.
and like you said, I mean, everything is, forget about even Netflix, everything is there on the internet. When the
Yeah.
internet is an uncensored space, you
Yeah.
have the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Finally, you're hoping that as a society we'll become more and more discerning
Yeah.
and we will watch the better stuff. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
we do ourselves.
Yeah.
We have all of that available. We don't watch all the
Yeah.
trash. We
Yeah.
try and watch what is decent. So my son is trying to walk tippy toe and he's taking his guitar out.
And
Okay, good, good,
yeah.
good. How much more? Shall we
You
open it
also,
for questions? Do you think, Kavita?
I think Shubha or the Lit Fest people should tell us now. I don't know what's the time at all.
It's
Should they?
7:17.
Are the questions
That's my
coming?
son. Come here, just say hello to, that's Kavitha auntie
Hi.
and the rest of the guests whom we can't see. That's my son who was in that 45-degree heat with me in
Hi,
Manto
Nandi.
and
How
in
are you?
Listen to Her. He can't hear you because I've got my headphones. Okay, run. She's saying, how are you? Huh? No, I can't talk to you right now, Baba. We're just finishing another 15 minutes. Okay, so that's so much for juggling.
Yeah.
So, can we take questions? I
You
see some
again.
questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Do you want to, or no? I'll leave it to you,
We can do that. We
Kavita.
can
What do
do
you
that.
want to
I would
do?
like to. I would like it
Yeah.
to people to ask questions.
Yeah. So should I read out some of the questions?
Yeah, I
Or-
think somebody else was supposed to read out. Yeah, I'll
I
just take it
also
off.
want to share a little bit before we move to that. I want,
Yeah.
because it's a literature festival, I think it would be right to talk about the book
Yes.
that
Yes. Absolutely.
the written words, became a film, and then the journey of making the film turned into a book. So I
Yeah.
did. I wrote a
Oh
book
yeah,
called
that's
Manto
true.
and
That's
I.
something which I wanted to speak about. That was yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big, heavy coffee table book with lots of photographs of the whole journey, right from the beginning, the
Yeah.
research, my trips to Lahore, meeting people here, finding the old Bombay, how difficult
Yeah.
it was to recreate the times, both Bombay and Lahore of the 40s, with all the modern day clutter of ACs and satellite dishes and traffic wasn't easy. So and then how did I cast, how did I raise the funds, the
Yeah.
crew? And it's
Yeah.
not just a creative journey, it's got a creative journey, it's got an emotional journey, how I changed, what were the questions that I was grappling with, my political journey,
Yeah.
why I wanted to do this film. Mainly I wanted to do Manto to respond to everything that's happening today in the country, and
Yeah.
and the relevance of the film, how it grew in fact since 2012 to 2018 when it finally got made and released. It really took those 6 years, and how things had changed so dramatically, as we know. and we lost your precious sister in this madness of hate and violence. And so where is that space to speak up, whether through, whether Gauri as a journalist, whether filmmakers, whether Dhabolkar, rationalists. Today there are so many professors who are behind bars. So these are difficult times. And I think as artists, as writers, we all have a certain kind of almost responsibility to at least to ourselves, what are the choices we are going to make, and how we are going to tell the story, how we are going to keep the conversations alive and keep our conscience alive. So I just wanted to talk a
Do you
little bit
find
about
that
Manto
one
and
last
I.
question,
So
Nandita, now that you have said about all
sure,
the current situation in the society, do you think when you're writing
right.
or even writing a book or acting, do you find this as some kind of a self-censorship? Do you feel, okay, if I write this, is it going to be okay? Is it going to be, accepted by people, or is it going to lead to some kind of violence, or backlash, from
Right.
various
No, I
sectors?
think there is a
You,
lot of that is happening. A lot of people I'm seeing around myself as well who are kind of self-censoring and saying it's better not to. What's the point?
yeah,
They will
yeah,
come and attack, or somebody or the other will raise. I think it's not self-censorship,
yeah,
but my idea of whether it's making a film or speaking or engaging is not to just polarize. The whole idea is to be able to engage, to be able to listen, to be able to communicate, to be able to say it in a way that people don't have their shutters down, in a way that they don't uh, we don't push people away with our with what we want to say. We draw people in, because I think everything in the world can be sorted if we truly have that intention and we have that conversation, and I think there are enough good sane people in the world who want peace, who are not so bloodthirsty. The hate mongers are always actually few, but their voices are shriller, so we hear them more.
that's,
But
yeah,
I think there are enough good compassionate people, so if we can reach out to them and sort of engage and find ways to find solutions, I think that's the path I want to take. So it's not really self censorship, but it's
yeah,
how I spoke maybe 10 years ago and how I expressed myself 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I was a college student, and every march and I would scream and all of that. I'm not that same person today. I want to now speak in a different voice, and it doesn't mean the core has changed or the concerns have changed, but I just want to engage in a different way.
wonderful. Wonderful, Nandita. We'll just see any chats. We'll see.
Yeah, we can maybe have time for two or three questions.
There's one. How important is partitions
Somebody,
literature
yeah.
in today's times? They say, do you think including the stories by
No, I
Manto
think it's,
Isma Chugta will help awareness?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they've become more and more important because, we are kind of, even through this whole pandemic, the way this whole
Yeah,
exodus of people that was happening, where people were leaving cities and going back to their villages, not knowing what they were going to do, not having food, water to even go back, no homes here, nothing there. That kind of emptiness, I mean, it reminds us of the migration during partition, which till date remains the largest world migration in the history of the world, and also everything that follows violence. I mean, how many times have do we have to be reminded that violence has only begetted more violence, or prejudice begets more prejudice, or hate begets more hate? Like, it doesn't really help. So till we don't learn, I think we have to keep reminding ourselves, we have to keep revisiting that part of history, that literature that reminds us, whether it's Premchand, whether it's Manto, whether it's Ismat, whether it's Kishan Chandar, whether it's Sahir Ludhianvi's poetry, and whether it's Faiz Ahmad Faiz's poetry. These are the people who lived through that time and are telling us that please don't make the same mistake again. Of course, we are not listening, but that's why I think their relevance will not end, sadly, very soon. I just read something where somebody said, my question is, Ashutosh Acharya has said, my question is that why don't we have movies on writers in India? And can you suggest some more authors who were the contemporary of Manto. I just said the name, so the second part I've answered. But it's
Yeah.
true. I mean, when I was doing an interview for Manto, and somebody, in fact, a journalist, reminded me that this is the first Hindi film about a writer. And it's tragic because in our country, imagine in every language there have been great writers, and we just don't have writers and painters and musicians and dancers and, photographers and whatever. There are no films about that. I always say there are more films about, con men and underworld dons than there are about, and a society that doesn't celebrate its artists and its writers is sort of soulless in some sense. We are, we don't give those kind of role models to our viewers, that means. And it's really tragic because many of their stories are very interesting. At that time, it wasn't easy to be a writer or a filmmaker or a poet. Like they would say, okay,
In
like
fact,
even my
it's not
father,
even
when
now,
he
it's not
left,
very easy.
it's not even, yeah, I mean, it's not even a job, right? So my father, when he left his small hometown at the age of 17 to come to JJ School of Art in Bombay to become an artist, and often people, like his family, of course, initially opposed it, but a lot of the times people would say, what do you do? He says, well, I'm a painter. He says, no, I mean, what do you do? What do you actually do? He said, no, that's what I do. So he had to almost explain. And that happens even now in many parts. So yeah, we definitely, we need to celebrate our artists and writers and tell their stories much more.
Do you
How
see
hard
any
is
more?
it for women in the field, which is predominantly dominated by men? Yeah, it's hard
I guess that's the
everywhere.
question.
It's
We all get it all the time. So I don't know if you want to answer
absolutely,
that.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
no, it's
always
true.
get,
We get it. We are
yeah,
always, as women filmmakers, we are always sort of told, and but more importantly, like earlier, 10 years ago, I was very opposed to this idea of being a woman director because, like we are just, when we direct, we are just directing.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
not thinking,
absolutely.
oh, I'm a woman and therefore I'm directing, or I'm directing like a woman director. What does that even mean? We don't say male director, we just say director. So I used to be really sort of irritated by that. But slowly over the years, as we are talking about the fact that we need women directors, we need diverse gender diversity, caste diversity, diversity, regional diversity, language diversity, just different diverse experiences need to come out. That's the way we'll see diverse stories. So now, in fact, I quite embrace the title and label, if I may say so, of being a woman director, because still we don't acknowledge that I'm a woman director. How can I say we want more women directors? So in that sense, you have to first embrace that label and say, yes, I'm a woman director, and I do have a certain gaze, and I do have a certain life experiences that inform that gaze. And yeah, so I think, in that sense, so now to answer your question, that it is difficult, like it's everywhere. As a director, you are at the higher end of the hierarchy, even as an actor. And I haven't had to struggle too much because I never wanted to be an actor. So that wasn't an ambition. So it freed me from the struggles of being an actor. But even then, even if you're on the top end of the hierarchy, it's amazing how there are subtle forms of sexism that is kind of omnipresent almost, on sets, how people talk to you, the language they use, the way they dismiss sometimes what you say, or even as an actor, sometimes a male actor is giving some suggestion, how that is taken and how your suggestion is kind of not heard. Things are changing. I think there'll be a lot more younger women filmmakers and a lot more women behind the camera in different roles, and I'm sure that will change the equation. That'll change the energy of the set also. Any question that pops out from power?
I think we have already talked of this self censorship.
Self censorship. Yeah. What is, in your opinion, writing about things that
We
are
have talked about
societally
that.
unacceptable? We have to, yeah, to some extent.
Yeah.
About fairness. Yeah. I mean, this campaign, Dark is Beautiful, that always question pops
Yes.
up. I supported this campaign that was started by an organization called Women of Worth in 2013. I supported. They started in 2009. And I think it just needed a bit of a face to the campaign because it was a raw nerve that one had touched. So many women had suffered through it and continue to suffer just because of their color of their skin. But because it's never really called out, it's so normalized through the representation in films and television and hoardings and magazines, that the fact that suddenly people are talking about it and realizing that it's just not cool to be so discriminatory because of something that you're born with. So it is something I feel quite passionately about. I think any form of discrimination we have to oppose. We can't be choosing that I will oppose this discrimination, but this discrimination I'm okay with. Any form of discrimination on the basis of your given identity should definitely be called out, and we have to keep looking at it again and again. Okay, should we? It's exactly an hour. It's a little more than an hour. So,
Yeah, I think.
yeah, Kavita, do you
Is
think?
somebody from the Lit Fest?
Yeah.
Is somebody from the Lit Fest coming in to say bye to us?
Yes.
How does this work now?
Should we just lay? I know this talking to a whole, at least this is better. Sometimes I do these Facebook lives. There is nobody. You're just
Yeah.
looking into this hole and you're just jabbering away. But thank you to all the listeners and viewers and those who will probably watch it later. Yeah, these, I think we have to keep having these conversations and
Yeah.
listening to each other. That's that's how maybe some small changes will happen in our lives. After all, what we are also a product of what we watch and what we read and the people we meet, and very subconsciously some of these thoughts sort of go into our minds and impact our responses, and that's how we know that we have changed and hopefully evolved in the direction we want to.
It's always wonderful
Thank
talking to you,
you.
Nandita. Thank you so much. We'll hope to catch up soon.
Likewise,
Thank,
Kavita.
thank
Lovely,
you.
lovely
Thank
talking. Yes,
yeah.
thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
Mysuru.
Mysuru Film Fest, Mysuru Lit Festival.
Mysuru Literary Festival.
Yeah.
As mentioned.
The Mysuru Literary Forum Charitable Trust and the literary community of the Mysore Book Clubs thanks you for attending the fourth Mysuru Literature Festival and the first virtual festival. I Opened a Book by Julia Donaldson. I opened a book and in I strode. Now nobody can find me. I've left my chair, my house, my road, my town, and my world behind me. I'm wearing the cloak. I've slipped on the ring. I've swallowed the magic potion. I fought with a dragon, dined with a king, and lived in a bottomless ocean. I finished my book and out I came. The cloak can no longer hide me. My chair and my house are just the same, but I have a book inside me. And now, at the virtual sessions of the Mysuru Literature Festival, we got to meet the authors who made this magic happen. We give our deepest thanks to the writers from across the world who enabled this. Authors who were able to join us in the digital space and share their books and writing with us. And for the past hour, we left our chairs, our houses, our roads, and traveled to meet them in this virtual space. Thank you for this unique experience.